Hello there, my name is Jonathan McIntosh, and in this video I would like to talk to you about the topic of learning to dance in Bali in Indonesia. The aims for this video are to examine the methods for teaching and learning traditional Balinese dance, and following I'll then introduce some basic information about particular dance movements, as well as discussing the importance of makeup and costuming. Towards the end of the video, I'll outline the interrelationship between music and dance in the Balinese context, and go on to explain how any attempt to understand one without the other will lead to a loss of understanding, or it won't help us to gain such a full picture as if we study music and dance together. So in Bali, everyone learns by watching and copying. Children in particular learn by copying their friends and peers, or from their parents and grandparents. In Bali, learning also takes on a special form, especially in relation to the transmission of traditional music and dance. In gamelan music, the teacher sits on the opposite side of an instrument and plays backward whilst teaching. In dance, a teacher molds a pupil's body into shape so that every nuance of the dance is embodied. The learning process in Bali is also a community event. For example, and unlike in Western contexts, lessons and rehearsals take place in public, usually in a community hall, such as an open pavilion, where everyone can observe what goes on in a lesson. If a child makes a mistake during such a lesson, then everybody usually laughs. However, such laughter is integral to the learning process, where individuals who make a mistake are temporarily excluded from the group before being re-included once more. If such individuals make an error, the teacher, as well as friends and family members, will often correct them. As a result, such a process helps to toughen children up for performance. Once children start to learn to dance, they also quickly find themselves performing in front of an audience even before they have perfected their skills. This practice teaches children humility and also enables them to gain valuable performance experience. The majority of my research in Bali has been conducted with children who attend what are known as dance studios, or sanggar tari. Sanggar means studio and tari means dance in Indonesian, and this is one of the studios that I've conducted, in which I've conducted research, and it's known as Sanggar Tari Mumbul Sari. This is a dance studio in the village of Kramas, which is in south central Bali, and I've worked with the teachers at this particular studio for over 10 years now. The Sangha was established by two dancers in 1993, and both of these dancers, they're husband and wife. The man is called Iwayan Rawit and his wife is called Ni Lu Happy Periamini. They are respected performers and dance teachers in the local as well as the wider area. And as you can see here, this is one of the dance teachers, Happy, who's standing up in the picture, and she's being surrounded by some of the younger children, and these are girls in the elementary level of the dance studio. And here's a picture of the people with whom I've conducted my research. So you can see Happy Periamini and Iwayan Rawit and their three daughters, and this picture comes from 2004. Dance, music and drama are integral to Balinese society and are performed for ritual as well as entertainment purposes. In ritual contexts, various forms of dance, music and drama are performed as offerings to the deities of the Bali Hindu religion. However, in secular contexts, they are performed to entertain the deities and human beings. Due to the central importance of dance in Balinese society, learning to dance remains a popular activity amongst Balinese children, although not all children choose to learn to dance. All of the children at this particular Sangha attend lessons of their own free will, and although the primary reason for attending lessons was to learn how to dance, it also provided an important social opportunity for children to meet up and talk with friends, as well as to play games between rehearsals. Only the youngest children were accompanied to the Sangha by a parent or sibling. The majority of children either walk or cycle, alone or with friends, to the twice-weekly dance lessons. The children from this particular Sangha also regularly perform for ceremonial and secular occasions, both inside and outside of the village. When asked to do so, additional rehearsal time is allocated and children are expected to attend. All lessons take place in a large open pavilion in the family compound owned by the dance teachers. And you can see how this photo on the screen is taken of a dance lesson in the compound, and they're dancing in the pavilion, and you can see that it's open on two sides. The Balinese way of teaching is unique. When a student first learns to dance, he or she stands behind the teacher and mimics his or her movements. The teacher sings the melody or the pokok of the gamelan musical accompaniment, as well as articulating or voicing the drum and gong cues. In addition to this, the teacher also calls out the names of steps and basic instructions, and sometimes these steps and instructions are worked into the melody line of the music. When the basic choreography has been memorized, the teacher moves behind the student and starts to manipulate or mold his or her body. To do this, the teacher will physically take hold of the student and move the student's arms, for example, and the teacher will also use his or her legs and feet in order to move the student's legs and feet in the correct manner. Traditionally, mirrors were not used, so students had to rely on kinesthetic transference, so feeling the dance through the teacher's body. However, as a result of the setting up of national performance academies, and there's one in Denpasar, the capital of Bali, mirrors have been increasingly used by the state in order to teach traditional dance to large groups of students at one time. So in many dance studios across Bali, mirrors are commonplace in the teaching practice. If you've ever been on holiday in Bali and been to a tourist performance, you will have seen that there are many different types of hand gestures, eye movements and stances in Balinese dance. And when people view this performance form for the first time, sometimes they can find it difficult to decipher what the meaning of Balinese dance. And particularly when we talk about hand movements. In Bali, hand gestures they're not necessarily integral to telling a story in a performance. This is unlike in the Indian context, where hand movements can actually tell the audience members a lot of information, and they're integral to the narrative of the plot. This doesn't happen in Bali. Most Balinese dance movements are abstract, so they don't actually have a meaning. And sometimes dances don't have plots. They might depict a particular character or an animal, such as a bird, for example, in female dances. But what is important is the style in which movements are executed. This is really of ultimate importance. And there are two general styles of dance in the Balinese context. There's refined performance style, which is called alus, and there's the unrefined keras or keras, the keras style. And we've been learning about these movements and styles of performance in relation to shadow puppet performances in Java. So let's now begin to talk about some of these movements in Balinese dance and why they're particular to this performance form. Well, the basic movement in Balinese dance is an asymmetrical stance known as the agam. There's a male and a female agam, and on the screen there's pictures of the female agam. So you have a right and a left agam, and in the right agam, which is on the left hand side of the screen as you are looking at it, the body weight is on the right foot, which is behind, and the left foot is placed at 45 degrees in front of the right foot. The torso is lifted and the shoulder blades are squeezed together. The squeezing together of the shoulder blades is important because it helps to give the arched look of female dance roles. So there's a kind of arch to the back. For female and refined male roles, the arms are at 90 degrees, and we can see that in the pictures on the screen, and the wrists are slightly lower than the elbows, and the hands are bent back at the wrists with the fingers in the right agam pointing upwards. The right hand, which is called the tangan mata, tangan means hand and mata means eye. The right hand is level with the right eye, and you can see that on the screen. And the left hand, which is called the tangan susu, tangan meaning hand, susu meaning milk, which is a metaphor for the breast, and it's then level with the breast, and we can see that in the picture. The head is slightly tilted to the right. So there's quite a lot of complicated components there, but once people embody how to do this, they do it automatically. So that's the right agam, which is on the left-hand side of the screen as we're looking at it. And then you can see that the left agam, which is on the right-hand side of the screen, it's almost the inverted image of the right agam. The only real difference is that you can see that the left hand, instead of the fingers pointing up, the fingers are pointing towards the left. And this is a kind of stylistic approach to dance performance. So that's the female agam, the agam kanan, which means right, and the agam kiri, which means left. Kanan meaning right, kiri meaning left. Here we have pictures of Wayan performing the male basic position is the agam. So you get the agam kanan, the right agam, and you get agam kiri, which is the left agam. But you can, in male dance, you also get low positions in the agam, which is called rendah, and you get high positions, which are upright, which is denoted through the use of the term tinggi. For strong and unrefined male roles, so keras performance styles, everything is much bigger when it comes to the agam. The arms cut through more space and the shoulders are lifted higher, closer towards the ears. Whereas in the female agam, we go back, the feet are positioned close together. You can see that on the screen. If we look at the male agam, the feet are positioned wide apart. Particularly in the rendah, the low agam, they're positioned much wider apart, and the knees are also positioned wide apart in that picture. So agams are important because this is where all dances begin and end, and all movements progress from the agam. The position of the agam is only momentarily held, however. So you don't holding a gum for a long time. You're moving into an agam or moving out of the agam. And what's important about the agam is that it also coincides with the striking of the gong again, usually. So again, this is another point of coincidence in gamelan music performance. So we've talked about the main stationary positions, but now let's talk about some other movements. So how do we move in and out of these stationary positions? Well, there are locomotive movements and transition movements. So these are how we move in and out from one agam to the other, and then transition movements about how we will transition into an agam. So locomotive movements are collectively known as tandang, and transition movements are known as tangkis. And here is an example of a locomotive movement called the nrengseng chuk. And it's quite hard to talk about it in pictures, but you can see that Happy is reaching up with her arms towards the right hand side, and she's on her tiptoes. And just imagine that she's then going to bring her right arm down and swing her left arm up so that her arms finish in the picture on the right hand side of the screen. And as she moves across the stage as she does this, so she's then going to shuffle her feet as she does it. And this shuffling of the feet is known as nrekseg. And then so we've got a locomotive movement. So we're going from stationary movements through locomotive movements to a stationary movement. And then they would add on another transition movement, which is called ngatab at the end of nrekseg. And the ngatab involves flicking the wrists of both hands, and as you flick the wrists, you stamp your foot, your right foot in this instance, because she's in the agam. No, it's the left foot because she's in the agam kanan, because her right foot is behind. I'm just going back to look at this picture. Yes, I have told you the right ones. Yes, there is the right agam. Okay, so I was a bit confused there. But let's move on. So we've talked about transition movements and locomotive movements, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in a wee while. In Bali is actually the only place in Indonesia where eye movements are integral to dance performance, and this is what makes Balinese dance performance unique in terms of all the dance styles performed in Indonesia. So in Bali, eye movements are called seledet, and you can do a seledet to the right, or you can do a seledet to the left. And these are two pictures of Happy and Wayan performing the right eye movement. So what you do when you do an eye movement or a seledet in the Balinese context is that you look straight ahead, okay, and then you open your eyes really wide, and then you look to the corner of your eye, in this case the right corner, and then bring your view from the right of your eye back to the middle. So you're looking straight ahead again. You don't necessarily move your head, you don't move your jaw, but it's the opening of the eyes and then darting of the eyes to the right, so that you see the white of the eye, and then coming back to the middle. That is known as a seledet. So in an 8-count colotomic structure, the eyes will move to the right, if we're doing a seledet kanan, on beat 6 or 7, and then return to the middle, so the dancer's looking forward, with the striking of the gong again. So again, the dancer might be in a stationary position, doing a seledet, but the eyes are moving and then come back to the center with the striking of the gong. So another sign of coincidence there. There are different ways of performing the seledet if you're doing a female performance style or a male performance style. And these are stylistically appropriate to various dances as well as performance genres. So let's talk again about transition or locomotive movements. Okay, so tandang. Walking styles in performances also denote gendered forms of movement. So children spend many hours, years learning how to walk properly, and the walking pattern for women is known as numbang, but it's also more commonly known as negol in Low Balinese. And this involves a swaying of the hips stemming from the knees, and as you then lift your feet slightly with each swing of the hips, the head also tilts from side to side. The knees are bent, and then this allows the dancer's body to be lower towards the ground, which is the preferred performance aesthetic. So the knees are close together, and you can see that the sarong that Happy is wearing helps to keep her legs close together as well, and this also imitates the costume that dancers would wear for female performance styles, which tends to be very tight and restricts movement. The male walking style is very different to the female walking style, and as males learn, boys learn to perform in this manner, and it can be a very time-consuming and painful process. And developing the ability to walk correctly as a male is really imperative, because this is where a lot of a dancer's strength and the ability of a dancer to perform for an extended period of time comes from the legs and building up the muscles there. The basic walking style is called malpal, and here the legs are turned out with the heel with each foot lifted towards the knee of the opposite leg. So you can see in the picture on the left hand side of the screen, as we're looking at it, Wayan is turning out the heel of the right foot, and then he lifts it in front of his body towards the knee of the left leg. Okay, and then when he puts the right foot down, he'll do the same with the left foot. When walking in a Malpal style, the chest and shoulders should remain still, and the dancer should try and remain as close to the ground as possible. Breathing is also reflected in the body movements of a dancer, and the up and down movement that's caused by breathing is also integral to the agam position. Okay, so dancers actually indicate moving going up and down, and this symbolizes the act of breathing. Dancers are trained to control their breath, how to hold and expel it consciously in order to give maximum power to the movements presented in performance. Facial and body expressions, known as tangkap, are crucial to convey the character of a dance. For female performance, the mouth should be in a semi-smile and the eyes should be vibrant. To denote anger or a sense of courage or strength, as required in some kras male dances, however, the mouth is more neutral and the eyes are opened much more widely. This helps to express the emotion of a dance and convey the energy of a dancer in performance. And you can see that in this picture, which comes from a seated dance performance, this is actually a cross-dressing style which has a more neutral form of expression. It's still a strong performance style, but it's not as strong as, say, a kras style. As I mentioned earlier, hand movements in the Balinese context don't always necessarily tell story. Unlike an Indian dance, there are some hand gestures that do have meaning. There are examples of two here in the pictures. There's a ulap ulap, which involves lifting up of the arms and the hands, and then the dancer kind of peeps underneath the hands when they're held out in this position. And then there's also a dance position and hand movement called nooding, which means to send a message. And this might be performed by a king in a dance drama performance when they're proclaiming an instruction to a servant. And you can see Happy performing a nooding, which is performed in quite a strong manner. Other hand movements, however, are simply named after their function. So we have hand movements that refer to checking a dancer's headdress or touching a bracelet in performance. What is important is the movement of a dancer's fingers, however, and no dance is complete without a quick quivering of moving fingers. And this quick quivering moving of the fingers from side to side, not back to front, is called jeriring. A refined character will have an elegant pulsating movement to the jeriring, whereas a warrior, strong character, will have a quick pulsating movement. Jeriring is also important to the energy of a performer and the energy dancers evoke in performance. If a dancer's fingers do not move in the correct manner in performance, then something is said to be lacking from the presentation, and the hands are often referred to as being dead, or mati. So we've talked a little bit about the main forms of movement and positions, transitions, locomotive movements. We've talked about hand movements, but makeup and costuming really add particular elements to the performance. They make the performance in many circumstances. And in this picture you can see the process of preparing one boy for performance. You can see the person applying the makeup is grabbing the student's head, and as he's applying eyeliner there, or an eye pencil, I think, yes. So a large component of stage performance in ballet is costuming and makeup, and the Balinese take this very seriously and can spend hours preparing for performance. Each dance and every character have their own particular type of dress, headdress, makeup or mask, and a basic makeup is used by both males and females. So there's a foundation, a liquid foundation that's put on the skin, and then there's face powder that's put on, and then from this point on there's different forms of makeup that's used for refined characters and unrefined characters. The body is then wrapped in many layers of costume, and in both male and female performance styles, these layers of costumes help to restrict and define the movements associated with particular dance forms. And then finally, many performers wear headdresses, and headdresses are known as gelungan, and the headdresses are seen as considered to be the most holiest part of the costume, and they do a lot to indicate a particular character type to the audience. Usually before a performance, offerings are given to the headdresses because they're worn on the most kind of spiritually important part of the body, which is the head. So this is make-upping, and then we can see that this is one particular example of a headdress. It consists of a front piece, which is a kind of cone-shaped gold thing, with a kind of semicircular rise in the middle that sits right on the front of the forehead, and it's held in place with a kind of rubber band that goes around the head. And then all these kind of gold, what look like kind of flower stems, they're individual, called bunga prado, which means golden flowers, and they're on long, there's maybe, looking at this picture, there's maybe about 15 of these, and they are kind of long metal spikes with then the flower, the golden fronds on them, and these are driven through a bun of hair at the back of the dancer. You can see the white powder faces being used in this picture. And then here are two examples of headdresses worn by particular performers. The two girls on the left-hand side of the screen are wearing costumes for a dance called Manukrawa. Manukrawa, in this performance, the dancers depict the movements of a water bird. And the pink cape is raised, and in the way that it's moved in the performance looks as if the dancers are flying like birds. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, there's the dance Baris Tunggal, which is a solo male-style performance in which the dancer depicts the movements of a warrior or a soldier. And again, you can see the arms are out, the legs are positioned wide apart, and he is wearing a triangular headdress, kalungan there. So, dance in Bali involves the close coordination of music and movement. The two are so closely linked that any attempt to try and comprehend one without the other would lead to a loss of understanding. According to the American ethnomusicologist Michael Tenzer, who works at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, he states, Balinese choreography, in its purest interpretation, is a detailed and subtle physical embodiment of the music that accompanies it, where the two art forms are an inexorable combination. When learning dance, dancers do not just learn steps and positions, they learn how to move in relation with music. To enable them to do this, dancers extract the basic rudiments of the musical accompaniment, such as melody, changes in rhythmic articulation, and drum patterns. By learning and embodying these rudiments in relation to the colotomic structure, such musical extractions become reference points for dancers as they learn to coincide the movement of their bodies with the music. In the same way, musicians who more often than not have had some prior dance experience learn about dance and a dancer's movement through music. When learning the structure of a composition, musicians also come to associate particular rhythms and colotomic structures with the movements of a dancer's body. Therefore, it could be said that dancers learn music as movement and musicians learn movement as music. So, to conclude, in this video we've examined some of the methods for teaching and learning traditional dance. The videos emphasised that learning by observation and imitation is very important within the Balinese context, and also the use of mouth gamelan in the learning process, where the teachers extract the melody, rhythmic elements and the colotomic structure from the complicated musical accompaniment. The videos introduce some basic information about dance movements, make-upping and costuming. For example, I've talked about the basic stance, the agam, transition and eye movements, and how these relate to alus and kasar performance styles. And then I've outlined the interrelationship between music and dance in Bali, where learning about dance involves learning about music, and the vice versa is true. And we've also talked about the importance of music and dance in Balinese society, especially in ritual contexts where music and dance are performed for the gods of the Bali Hindu religion, but also in secular contexts where performances are presented for the gods and for the Balinese in their everyday context.